The first time I saw him, I hated him. Not because he did anything wrong, but because he made breathing suddenly feel like labor. He walked into our living room with that easy, unshaken confidence of someone who didn't realize the ground had just tilted under my feet. My mother beamed at him as if he was a savior. To her, he was just the tutor, another expense to keep her fragile, disappointing son from failing math again. To me, he was danger disguised as kindness. His name was Ethan. He had a smile too soft for the cruel world I thought I lived in, and a pair of green eyes that seemed to see through every flimsy wall I tried to build. He was 24, far older than me, and he carried himself like someone who knew exactly where he belonged. I was 18, still stumbling through high school hallways where whispers chased me like shadows, and every day felt like a fight not to be exposed for what I was. That first evening, Ethan leaned casually on the doorway and said, "So, you're the kid I'm supposed to save from algebra?" His voice was warm, teasing, and entirely too dangerous. I hated how badly I wanted to hear it again. Our sessions started 3 nights a week, in the suffocating quiet of my family's living room. My parents, always too busy, too absent, left me alone with him. The rules were clear, unspoken, but carved into the tension of the air. He was the tutor, I was the student, and nothing else was allowed to happen. But rules bend when silence stretches too long, when eyes meet too often, when laughter slips through the cracks of discipline. He would sit beside me, explaining equations with a patience that made me ache. His hand hovered close, guiding me through problems without ever brushing my skin. But every time his sleeve brushed against mine, every time his breath ghosted too near, it was like fire catching on paper. I caught myself staring too long at the curve of his jaw, the way the veins traced down his wrist when he held his pen, the faint scar near his temple that begged for a story. He caught me once, eyes locking with mine in a silence that froze the air between us. I looked away first, cheeks burning, heart pounding. He didn't say anything, but his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, something heavier, like he understood too much. It should have been simple. Algebra, homework, college prep. But every night the line blurred. One evening, after a brutal day at school where someone had shoved me into a locker and hissed a word I couldn't erase, I sat at the table numb, unable to focus. Ethan noticed immediately. "You're not here tonight," he said softly. "Talk to me." I laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't get it. Try me." There was something about the way he said it that cracked something open in me. I told him, not everything, but enough about the whispers, the weight, the exhaustion of pretending I didn't care. When I finished, he didn't pity me. He didn't rush to fix it. He just looked at me with steady eyes and said, "You're stronger than you think." And somehow I believed him. But strength didn't stop the longing. The nights grew heavier, more dangerous. My gaze lingered longer. His restraint tightened like a rope pulled too taut. I wanted him, God, I wanted him. But the fear of ruining everything choked me. One night, as rain battered against the windows, I blurted it out. Not the full truth, but enough to ruin the fragile balance. "I hate that I can't stop thinking about you," I whispered, eyes fixed on the floor. The silence that followed stretched like an eternity. I braced myself for rejection, for laughter, for anger. Instead, Ethan exhaled, slow and deliberate, and said, "You're not ready, and I can't be the reason you break before you even begin to live." It was both salvation and punishment, because in his eyes, I saw a truth he refused to touch. He wanted me to. From that night on, everything changed. He was still my tutor, still patient, still gentle. But there was a tension in the way he avoided letting our hands brush, in the way he leaned back when I leaned too close. He was waiting. For me. And I hated him for it. Hated that he was strong where I was weak. Hated that he was the adult, the wall, the distance. But beneath the hate was a desperate, fragile gratitude, that he cared enough not to take advantage of the boy who didn't yet know how to stand in his own skin. I lay awake at night replaying every moment, every glance, every word, and I promised myself one day I would be brave enough to cross the line, brave enough to choose him. And when that day came, I prayed he would still be there, waiting. The first time I almost kissed him was an accident. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself afterward when the memory replayed endlessly in my head. We were bent over the same notebook, his handwriting brushing the margins with neat, practiced strokes while I scribbled frantic, uneven notes beside him. I leaned closer, too close, because my eyes were following the curve of his letters instead of the numbers he was writing. And when he turned his head at the exact moment I did, our faces stopped an inch apart. My breath caught. His eyes widened. For a split second, the world narrowed to the soft green of his gaze and the warmth of his skin radiating across that single, unbearable inch. And then he pulled back. "Focus?" Ethan said, too quickly, like the word had to save us both from drowning. I laughed, sharp and brittle, because what else could I do? My chest felt split open, raw. I wanted to scream that focusing was impossible when he existed this close to me. But I just scribbled harder, pretending I hadn't almost made the biggest mistake of my life. A week later, I overheard my mother on the phone. "Yes, he's wonderful. Very professional. My son's grades are improving already. Ethan is such a blessing for us." I wanted to laugh. Professional. Blessing. My mother had no idea that the professional tutor was a storm I could barely keep from consuming me. But Ethan never slipped. Not once. He always showed up on time, always carried himself with an unshakable steadiness, always kept the rules intact. It infuriated me, because I could feel it buried beneath his restraint was the same pull that dragged me toward him. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened when my laughter caught him off guard, in the way his fingers twitched when mine brushed too close, in the silence that grew thicker with every session, heavy with everything neither of us dared to name. Then came the night I broke. School had been brutal. Someone had plastered a note on my locker. "Freak," in red marker, big enough for half the hallway to see. My friends looked away, embarrassed, complicit. I ripped it down, shoved it into my bag, and skipped the rest of the day. By the time Ethan arrived, I was a wreck. I tried to hide it, burying myself in the textbook, but he noticed immediately. Of course he did. "Talk to me," he said softly. I shook my head. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." That cracked me open in a way nothing else had. I slammed the book shut, pushed it away, and hissed, "Why do you care so much?" His eyes softened, not with pity but with something far heavier. "Because you deserve someone to care." The words undid me. Before I knew it, tears blurred the numbers on the page, and I was trembling. And Ethan reached out. For the first time, he reached out. His hand brushed my shoulder, tentative, as if asking permission. When I didn't flinch, he pulled me closer, just enough for me to fold against him. My cheek pressed against the solid warmth of his chest, and his arm circled my back. I let myself breathe in the faint scent of his cologne, let myself believe just for one night that I wasn't alone. "Whatever they say," he murmured against my hair, "it doesn't define you." I wanted to stay there forever, but forever lasted 5 minutes. Because the moment I pulled back, the guilt in his eyes was unbearable. He looked like he'd broken his own commandments, like he'd sinned by offering me the comfort I so desperately needed. "This can't happen again," he said, his voice rough. The words cut deeper than any note on my locker ever could. After that night, everything changed again but worse. He became distant, not cruel, never cruel, but guarded. He sat further away, explained things faster, didn't let silence linger long enough for me to drown in it. He was building walls as quickly as I was trying to tear mine down. And it hurt. God, it hurt. Because I knew why. He wasn't rejecting me out of disgust. If it were that simple, I could have survived it. No, Ethan was protecting me. From him. From us. From the world that would never forgive what we were. And the more he pulled away, the more I hated myself for wanting him anyway. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon. My parents were gone for the weekend, and Ethan showed up with extra books, determined to help me prepare for finals. But I couldn't take it anymore. "You don't get to do this," I snapped, slamming the notebook shut. You don't get to care one night and pretend nothing happened the next. His jaw tightened. I told you it was a mistake. Don't lie to me, I spat. You felt it too. I know you did. The silence that followed was suffocating. His hands curled into fists on the table. His eyes, those damn eyes, burned with something he refused to name. Finally, he exhaled, slow and heavy. Yes, he said. I felt it. I feel it every time I look at you. But that doesn't mean we can act on it. The confession hit me like a lightning strike. Relief and despair collided in my chest. He wanted me. He admitted it. And still, he wouldn't let himself have me. Why? My voice cracked. Why can't you just let yourself? Because you're 18. He cut in, voice sharp with control. Because you're my student. Because if I take one step closer, I'll be taking advantage of you. And I'd rather tear myself apart than hurt you like that. Tears blurred my vision, hot and unrelenting. So what? You'll just sit there, pretending you don't want me, while I lose my mind wanting you. His eyes softened then, the fire dimming into something unbearably tender. I'll wait, he said quietly. As long as it takes, I'll wait. Until you're ready. Until you're strong enough to choose this without fear. The words shattered me, because they were both the cruelest and the most beautiful thing anyone had ever said to me. And in that moment, I hated him more than I'd ever loved anyone. That night I couldn't sleep. His words echoed in my head like a curse. I'll wait. I didn't want him to wait. I wanted him now. I wanted to erase the space between us, to prove that I wasn't fragile, that I wasn't a child, that I could stand beside him as his equal. But deep down I knew he was right. I wasn't ready. And so I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, torn between hope and despair. Because the only thing worse than loving Ethan was knowing he loved me too, and that love was the very reason he refused to touch me. The weeks that followed were torture. I saw him everywhere, not just in my living room, but in my dreams, in the echo of every quiet moment. His smile haunted me. His restraint strangled me. And the more time we spent together, the sharper the ache became. One evening, after another session spent in silence that screamed louder than any words, I blurted out, "You'll get tired of waiting." Ethan looked at me, steady as always. "No," he said simply. "Not for you." And that was when I realized I wasn't just falling in love. I was already gone. Summer crept in quietly, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin and makes the air feel heavy with things unsaid. By then, Ethan and I had settled into a dangerous rhythm, pretending I didn't notice the way he avoided my gaze. Him pretending he didn't hear the tremor in my voice whenever I said his name. But silence has an expiration date. The first crack came when my father noticed. He was never around much, my father. A lawyer who loved his cases more than his family. A man whose approval was something I'd given up trying to earn years ago. But one evening, he came home earlier than expected and found Ethan sitting at the dining table with me. Our notebooks scattered, our laughter lingering in the air from some joke I barely remember now. "What's going on here?" His voice was sharp, suspicious. "Tutoring," I said quickly, but my pulse betrayed me. His eyes narrowed, scanning between us with the kind of scrutiny that always made me feel small. "Looks like more than tutoring." Ethan stood immediately, his professionalism sliding back into place like armor. "Sir, I can assure you," but my father cut him off. "Save it. I know boys like you. Smooth, charming, pretending you're just helping when you're really here for something else." The accusation hit me like a punch. I wanted to scream at him, defend Ethan, but the words tangled in my throat. My father's voice was law in that house, and I had been raised to obey it. Ethan, however, didn't flinch. His jaw tightened, but his tone stayed calm. "With all due respect, your son is my student. Nothing more." It should have reassured my father. Instead, it shattered me, because I heard the truth buried in his words, nothing more. Not to the world. Not to him. Not until I was ready, until the stars aligned, until some impossible future. My father dismissed him with a glare, muttering something about keeping boundaries and finding another tutor if this becomes a problem. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. The way Ethan stood tall in front of my father. The way his voice carried conviction, even as it cut me open. The way I hated myself for wanting him to say something else. The second crack came a week later, when Ethan canceled a session. It was the first time. He texted me short, polite, too formal. Something came up. We'll reschedule. I stared at the screen, numb. Something inside me twisted, convinced this was the beginning of the end. That he had finally realized waiting wasn't worth it. That he'd chosen sanity over me. When he showed up 2 days later, nothing seemed different. He smiled, he explained equations, he asked about my week. But something had shifted. I saw it in the exhaustion etched into his face, in the way he avoided letting the silence linger. Halfway through the session, I couldn't take it anymore. "Where were you?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Just busy." "Don't lie." My voice cracked. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw something raw there. Something fragile. "I needed space," he admitted quietly. "I'm human too, you know. And it's hard being near you and not being allowed to." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Not being allowed to what? Touch me? Hold me? Kiss me until the world fell away." My chest ached with all the words we couldn't say. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be," he said, forcing a smile. "Just understand." But I didn't understand. Not then. All I knew was that the distance between us was suffocating, and I couldn't figure out if I wanted to close it or run before it destroyed me. The final crack, the one that broke everything, came in July. It was the 4th, fireworks booming across the sky, the neighborhood alive with barbecues and sparklers. My parents were gone again, off to some party with people who barely knew my name. Ethan had stayed late after tutoring, helping me with an essay. When the sky lit up outside, we both stood at the window, watching bursts of red and gold paint the night. The silence between us was unbearable. "Do you ever get tired of waiting?" I asked suddenly. His jaw tightened. "What do you mean?" "For me," I said, my voice shaking. "You said you'd wait. But what if I'm never brave enough? What if I never—" I couldn't finish. The fear strangled me. Ethan turned then, his face illuminated by the flicker of fireworks. His eyes burned, not with anger but with something heavier. "You will," he said. "One day, you'll look at yourself and realize you're stronger than all the voices trying to break you. And when that day comes, I'll be here. But until then." He stepped back, away from me, away from the window, away from the temptation that pulsed between us. And I snapped. I grabbed his arm before he could move further. My hand burned where it touched him, and for the first time, I didn't let go. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't walk away from me." His breath hitched. He looked down at my hand, then up at me, torn between restraint and desire. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Yes, I do," I said, though my voice trembled. "I want you." The fireworks outside roared, but inside, the silence was louder. For one unbearable moment, I thought he'd give in. His body leaned forward, his lips parted, his eyes searching mine like they'd found home, and then pulled away. "No," he said, his voice breaking. "Not like this." And just like that, he was gone. He didn't come back for weeks. First, I told myself he was just busy. Then I told myself he was giving me space. Then I stopped lying altogether. He had left, and I hated him for it. But mostly I hated myself, for not being enough, for not being brave enough, for needing him more than I needed air. I spiraled. My grades slipped. My nights grew longer. My chest felt heavier with every unanswered text. My father noticed again, of course he always noticed when I failed. He threatened to hire another tutor, but I refused. Because even if Ethan was gone, no one else could replace him. The worst part? He had kept his promise. He had waited. It was me who couldn't reach him. By the time August came, I had almost convinced myself it was over. That he had moved on, found someone his age, someone who didn't come with rules and risks and heartbreak. Until one evening, just as the sun was setting, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Ethan standing there, looking exhausted but determined. "I can't stay away anymore," he said, his voice raw. And suddenly, I could breathe again. He stood there on my doorstep like a man carrying both sin and salvation, his shoulders tense, his eyes burning with everything he had tried so hard to bury. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. I was afraid that if I blinked, he'd vanish again, like the cruel dream I'd been replaying every night since the 4th of July. But he didn't move. He didn't leave. Instead, Ethan said the words that split me open. "I've been waiting for you to be brave, and I think you finally are." I didn't answer. Not with words. My chest was too tight, my throat too raw. Instead, I stepped forward, grabbed his shirt with trembling hands, and kissed him. The world cracked open. It wasn't gentle, not at first. It was desperate, angry, full of all the weeks and months of longing and restraint. His lips met mine with a force that made my knees buckle. And his hands, God. His hands finally pulled me close the way I dreamed of for so long. Every rule shattered in that moment. Every warning, every boundary, every voice that told us we couldn't. None of it mattered. Not when he was here, not when his breath mingled with mine, not when I finally understood what it meant to be seen and wanted and chosen. When we finally pulled apart, gasping, he rested his forehead against mine. "I shouldn't," he whispered. "But you did," I whispered back. And neither of us regretted it. The weeks that followed were like living in secret sunlight. We carved out moments in the quiet corners of my world, late nights on the porch when the cicadas sang too loud, stolen touches during study sessions that weren't really about studying anymore, whispered confessions in the dark where no one else could hear. I learned the stories behind his scars, the fears he carried, the dreams he buried. He learned the fragile truths I had hidden from everyone else, that I was terrified of never being enough, that I hated the boy in the mirror some days, that I was still learning how to love myself. And slowly, with every kiss, every touch, every promise, Ethan taught me how to believe I was worth loving. But love doesn't exist in a vacuum. My father found out. I don't know how. Maybe he saw the way I looked at Ethan. Maybe he read the unspoken words between us. Maybe parents always know when their children are holding a secret too heavy to carry. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen, his voice low and cold. "Are you in love with him?" The question was a blade. I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect Ethan, to protect us. But something inside me snapped. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling but certain. "I am." The silence that followed was thunderous. My father's face twisted with anger, disappointment, fear, emotions I'd spent my whole life trying not to provoke. "You're throwing your future away," he hissed. "With a man who's using you." "He's not using me," I said, louder this time, stronger. "He's the first person who's ever waited for me, who saw me, who loved me without trying to change me." And for the first time in my life, I didn't back down. The fallout was brutal. My father threatened to throw Ethan out, to call the police, to end everything before it began. My mother cried, torn between fear and love, begging me to reconsider. For a while, it felt like the world was collapsing, that the fragile happiness we'd built was about to be crushed under the weight of judgment and expectation. But Ethan didn't run. He stood beside me, calm and unshaken, and said to my father, "I love your son. I won't apologize for that. But I will respect whatever choice he makes." And then he looked at me, waiting, always waiting. In that moment, I realized the choice was mine. It had always been mine. And for once, I wasn't afraid. We left that night, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in quiet defiance. I packed a bag, and Ethan drove me to his apartment, a small, cluttered space filled with books and the faint smell of coffee. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was ours. For the first time, I felt free. The months that followed were not easy. We faced whispers, stares, questions we couldn't always answer. I struggled with school, with the weight of being 18 and in love with someone the world said I shouldn't be. Ethan struggled with guilt, with fear, with the burden of protecting me when sometimes I didn't want protection, I just wanted him. But through every fight, every tear, Every night spent curled against each other in exhausted silence. We held on. Because love isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. About choosing each other, even when the world tells you not to. Years later, I look back on that summer and smile. I remember the way his hand hovered before it ever touched me. The way he pulled back when I begged him not to. The way he waited patiently until I was strong enough to meet him in the middle. I remember the pain, the fear, the heartbreak of almost losing him. And I remember the quiet triumph of finally choosing love over silence. Ethan kept his promise. He waited, and I kept mine. I became brave enough. On our wedding day, standing under an open sky in the heart of America, surrounded by friends who had become family, I looked into his eyes and said the words I had carried with me since that first night on the couch when everything began. I hate that I couldn't stop thinking about you. He laughed, pulling me close. Good, because I never stopped thinking about you either. And when he kissed me, our families watching, our world finally catching up to the truth we had always known, it wasn't desperate or forbidden anymore. It was home, because in the end, that's what love really is. Not a fire that burns too bright and fades, but a flame that waits, patient, steady, unyielding, the kind of love that says, I'll wait until you're brave enough, and then stays forever. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.